What is going on, guys? It's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS5 buyer's guide. So in this buyer's guide, we're going to be looking at a few tips and tricks on how to get your hands on a PS5 that's going to be on a jailbreakable firmware. So currently we have a partial jailbreak that works up to firmware 4.51 or lower that can allow you to run an FTP server and access the file system and manipulate the hard drive and access the debug settings and potentially other things as well. Although we don't have a full jailbreak yet, and we still don't know exactly what firmware a full jailbreak will come out for. So it could be 4.51, but it could be an even lower firmware than that, and that is a possibility. However, it is likely that when we do get a full jailbreak for the PS5, it will be for one of the firmwares that's already been partially jailbroken, so 4.51 or lower, since those are the firmwares that the exploit developers are actually on and are working on, and they have a partial jailbreak for already. So it's likely that when we do get a full jailbreak, it will be for one of those firmwares. So that's why this guide is going to be targeting 4.51, because that was the last firmware before the partial jailbreak was patched. So, you know, when a full jailbreak comes out, it will probably be for that firmware or lower, but the lower the better. So if you can get a console that's on an even older firmware than 4.51, then that would be even better. So we're looking for a console that's on 4.51 or lower. So the 5.0 update, the update that came out after 4.51, came out on the 23rd of March 2022. So you want a console that was manufactured before that date, preferably before March in general, because sometimes they actually manufacture the consoles with the latest firmware on them a little bit before the latest firmware is officially pushed out publicly, which means early March or mid-March, they could have been producing consoles on 5.0. So you want to make sure you get a console that was manufactured. I would say February should be safe enough. So February 2022 or below will be fine. Anything above that, anything in March or April or anything beyond that will be on a higher firmware and not jailbreakable. So also, there's a difference between digital edition consoles and disc edition consoles. So preferably you want to get your hands on a disc edition console. And that is because there's an extra vulnerability in the disk drive that can be exploited if you have a disc edition console. So the console is essentially more vulnerable to more exploits if you have a disc edition versus the digital edition. Now, currently, the partial jailbreak that works on 4.51 and lower will also work on digital edition consoles because you can use the WebKit to run the vulnerability instead of the disk drive. But if you do have a disc edition console, it's just generally better because you have more options, more vulnerabilities in the console, so a better chance of jailbreaking it fully in future. So I would highly recommend a disc edition console if you can get one, but obviously the digital edition consoles are still fair game, although, you know, there is that slight caveat of it not supporting the Blu-ray exploit. So firstly, there is the idea of buying a bundle. So for example, we've got this Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart bundle here. So the good thing about bundles is that they only run them for a limited time when the game actually launches. So you can just check when did Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart launch, and you can see it launched in June 2021. So that basically means that any of these bundles here with Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart will be on a low enough firmware. It will be on a jailbreakable firmware. So that's perfect. So you do need to make sure with these bundles that you are getting the official bundle. So that is this box art here that actually has the box art of the game on the PS5 box itself. That means it is the official Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart bundle, and it will be on a low enough firmware as long as you're buying a new console and not a pre-owned system, because if you buy a pre-owned system, then the person who owned it before you could have updated the firmware and most likely will have. So you need to make sure it's a new unopened console that has the box art of the game on the PlayStation 5 box. And the reason that I say that is that some of these retailers, once they sell out of the official bundle, they will just make their own bundle where they will ship you a separate PS5, a separate retail PS5 with a separate copy of the game, which will obviously be on a higher firmware, and it's because it's not the official bundle. So you want to avoid those. And this retailer is one of the ones that does that. At least they tell you here in the description, because they say UK sale only, and then they say game may come separately and box art may differ. So that means they are selling a separate copy of the game with a separate PS5 instead of the official bundle. So you need to make sure you're getting the official bundle that has the box art on the PS5 itself. And unfortunately, there's not very many of these bundles that were made. There is also the Horizon Forbidden West bundle, but I would avoid these because they were actually running these for a longer amount of time than they normally would. So even well after Forbidden West came out, they were still producing these Forbidden West bundles, which means some of the later Forbidden West bundles actually have firmware 5.0 on them, whereas the older versions of these bundles will come with 4.51 or 4.50. So unfortunately, you can't really trust these Forbidden West bundles. So that is unfortunate because there are still quite a few of those available. So if you can't get a bundle, what else can you do? Well, the next thing to do is look at the actual model number on the box. So if you're buying from a retail store, you'll find the model number on multiple places on the box. Or if you're buying from eBay, then usually the seller will have pictures of the box that they're selling and they'll have the model number on there. So it's usually in the bottom right hand corner, on the front of the box. Sometimes it's on the top of the box, on the side of the box. You should find the model number, and it's usually CFI dash and then a 5-digit number. So you can see you've got things like CFI 1016A, CFI 116A, 126A, or 5A, or B. B is digital, A is disc edition. So what you're really looking for here is you're looking for the first 2 digits. Ignore the last 3 digits. Just focus on the first 2 digits after the dash. So 10. So what you're looking for is a 10 model. The 10 models are the original PS5s, the original ones that were first produced, and they are going to be on a much, much older firmware. They're definitely going to be on a jailbreakable firmware. So those are the ones you want, the CFI-10 models. Now there's also the 11 models and the 12 models. The 12 models are the very latest models that are being produced right now. Those are the ones you want to completely avoid because those are going to be on a much higher firmware. They're not going to be jailbreakable. So avoid the CFI-12 models. Go for a CFI-10 model if you can find it. Now the CFI-11 models, those are kind of 50-50 because they started being produced in mid-2021. So all through mid-2021 to early 2022 up to February, those consoles will be fine. They'll be on a low enough firmware, 4.51 or lower. However, they were still producing those models well into mid-2022, which is after 5.0 came out. So therefore, a lot of those consoles are going to be on 5.00 and not going to be jailbreakable. So it's a bit of a gamble if you go for a CFI-11 model. However, if you are buying from a third-party seller, like an eBay seller, you could just message the seller and ask them when they originally purchased that console. If they say that they purchased it in 2021 or early 2022, January or February, then it's probably fine. It's probably going to be on 4.51 or lower. Now, there is a trick to find out when the console was manufactured if you're buying from the European market. So if you're buying a console in Europe or you're buying a console in the UK and potentially other regions, I don't believe this applies to North America. I think this is mainly a European thing. But if you buy a console in Europe or the UK, the serial number is actually on the box. If you're in an actual physical store, you can actually take the box, turn it upside down, and you'll see the little square cutout in the bottom of the box that will have the long serial number on it. And this only applies to the CFI-11 models. So you'll have the full serial number there on the box. And of course, if you're buying from an eBay seller, you can just ask them for a picture of the serial number, or they might already have it in their pictures. So yeah, you just want to make sure that you check that serial number because it can actually tell you what year and month that the console was manufactured in. So as you can see here, you've got this long string. You've got like SO1 dash. After the dash, there is a letter. Ignore the letter. After that letter, there are 3 digits. And those 3 digits represent the year and month. So if it says 22, that means 2022. If it says 21, then that means 2021. And then the 3rd digit represents the month. So in this case, you can see this particular console is a 216. So that means 2021 and then the 6th month of the year, which is June. So that means that console was manufactured in June of 2021, which is perfect. It's going to be on a very old firmware. That's exactly what you want. So you can see this one here is a 21C. So that is, of course, December of 2021, which would be fine. Any console in 2021 is fine. It's going to be on a firmware that's lower than 4.51. That's perfect. However, if it says 22, then obviously that's 2022. So the only months in 2022 that are going to be acceptable are going to be 1 or 2. So January or February. So if it's a 221, January 2022, that's fine. If it's a 222, then of course that is February 2022, which should also be okay. But if it's 223, 224, 225, anything like that, then it's too high of a firmware and it's not going to be on a low enough firmware. So you want to avoid those. So 222, 221, or any 21 2021 models, those are fine. Those will be on a low enough firmware. And I believe this method with the serial number was discovered by a channel called McCook, or MCKUC. So I'll go ahead and link his channel down in the video description. So that's what to do if you're in Europe and you're trying to find a CFI 11 model, then you can tell what month and year it was manufactured by the serial number on the box. However, if you're in the North American market, then unfortunately for you, it's not going to be there. The serial number is not going to be there on the box that gives you that information. So for you, you're just going to have to message the seller and hope they're being truthful when they tell you when they originally purchased the console. Or of course, you could actually buy a console from Europe, from the European market, and have it shipped to the US. That's always a possibility as well. But that's pretty much it, unfortunately. So yeah, just to take a look here as an example, you can see here on eBay, there's a console here. This one is, let's see, a disc edition console, 550. If we go in here, you can see the serial number in the bottom right-hand corner is not very evident, but I can see on the top right-hand corner there, that looks like a CFI-116A. So it may be somewhere else in the box. Here we go. Here's the front of the box. That's more clear. You can see that one is a CFI-1116A. So, you know, you can use the pictures here to try and find a CFI 10 model, which is definitely going to be in a low enough firmware. Or in this case, because he hasn't included pictures of the serial number, I could just send this seller a message and ask them for a picture of the serial number, the square cutout at the bottom, and then I can find out by the serial number if it's on a low enough firmware or not, using the guide that I just showed you. So that's one thing you can do. There's also people who are already selling, you know, firmware 4.03 guaranteed. You know, people who know that the console is going to be on a low enough firmware anyway. But obviously those sellers know that the console's worth a lot more because it's a lot rarer, and therefore they are hiking up the price. But you can see here that this person actually provides the serial number directly in the picture. So you can see F218, which is August of 2021, which would be fine. No issues there. So yeah, of course, you can do that as well. If you've got the money to, you know, pay the extra price for a guaranteed console that's going to be on, you know, a particular firmware, then that is something you can do as well. But yeah, that's essentially what you're looking for, guys. CFI-10 models, that's going to be perfect. Obviously, older bundles like the Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart bundle, if you can get the actual official bundle itself and not a separate bundle that the retailer's selling. And also the CFI-11 models, if you can check the serial number in the European markets and tell by the serial number if it's a 2021 model or an early 2022 model. And of course, if you're in the North American market and all you can find is a CFI-11 model, then ask the seller when they purchased the console. Hopefully they purchased it early 2022 or in 2021, or buy a console from the European market and have it shipped to you. Unfortunately, those are really your only options as far as I'm aware. So that is pretty much it for this video, guys. I know it's not perfect in terms of the methods available to you guys, but this is all we have at the moment for trying to get an older console. It's also worth noting that the longer you leave it, then the more scarce these consoles are going to be, the more expensive they're going to be to get one that's on a low enough firmware, the harder to find they're going to be. So, you know, the earlier that you can get one, the better. Otherwise, you are really going to struggle to get them in future. It's already getting pretty difficult as is. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.